When people hear that I am Chris Gilbert and I teach speech and communication, they often think about presentation skills. They think I'm the person that makes the students really nervous because I make students go up there and give presentations. And that is true, but it's not the only type of communication that we have. There's a very overlooked form of communication that's easy to forget about, and that is intrapersonal communication. The kind of talk that we have with ourselves. If you're here today, my guess is you've got some stress in your life. You've got some stress, not just because you're here, but I think I know you've got stress in your life because you engage in knowledge work. Knowledge work is any kind of work without discrete edges. It's not clearly defined. It's not like something like picking tomatoes. If your job is to pick tomatoes, how do you know when you're done? There's no more tomatoes, right? Easy to tell. But your job isn't like that. Your job is to write an essay, prepare a presentation, get ready for an exam. How do you know when your essay is done? Couldn't you always tweak one or two things? How do you know when your presentation is ready? Couldn't you always practice a couple more times? It's never really done until you walk away from it. It's a bit like the way that George Lucas described making a movie, that a movie is never finished, it's only abandoned. The work that you have in your lives are kind of like this. We have assignments called knowledge work without discrete edges. It's up to us to say that they're done and abandon them, which means the task can always linger on our minds. As we're about to fall asleep, we can think, oh my gosh, is my presentation ready? Or holy smokes, I don't know if I'm ready for this exam coming up, right? These tasks can kind of linger and eat away at us. And especially now, in a world where we have all these sort of like half online, half in-person things, we're doing Zoom calls, it can start to feel a little bit less like we work from home, and it can feel more like we are sleeping at work. The boundaries between personal lives and work lives have become faded, and the work itself is hard to delineate. What I'd like to do is to try to give you a few different tools that you can use, 3 specific tools that you can use to combat 3 different self-talk illusions. Our brains are really good at keeping us stressed and freaked out. Not because they're bad or because they're especially anxious, they're actually looking out for us. But there are 3 tricks that our brains use to keep us kind of in a state of anxiousness, stress, and being freaked out. And we can learn 3 self-talk techniques to reclaim the scripts that our brain uses, to use our own self-talk for our benefit. And if you feel like today is actually a little bit too short, I'm going to try to cram a lot in today, but if you find that you actually want a bit more of this stuff, it's not quite enough to cram into 1 hour, I do have a download for you at the end of today where there's kind of a deeper dive into all different forms of self-talk, not just 3 tricks. There's going to be like 11 different tricks. So if this is stuff that's up your alley, I've got that for you at the end there. Why is our brain trying to trick us? Imagine that you are an ancient human on the savannah. You are out there on the plains and doing your hunter-gatherer thing, when all of a sudden behind you is a rustle in the bushes. On the one hand, whatever the thing is that made the noise could be safe. It could just be a cute little bunny rabbit, it could be the wind, it could be nothing. However, the other category of thing, it could be dangerous. It could be a giant tiger or a lion or a bear that's out to get us. Now, for the sake of this thought experiment, let's imagine that whatever we assume out there, we're going to be wrong. If we assume that it's something dangerous, scary, and we book it out of there, run back home, but we were wrong, it was actually just the wind, what happens to us? We're fine. Maybe a little bit winded, maybe a little embarrassed, but we're okay. But what if we assume it's the wind or a bunny rabbit and we're wrong? Eck. We don't have the luxury of being winded and being embarrassed in front of our friends. We descended from the ones who ran. You and I have a predisposition to get freaked out about things before we understand things. And it's not because our brains are dumb. It's because our brains are really effective. We had to make these snap decisions in a moment. The problem is that modern day issues here in the 21st century are not giant killer cats lurking behind us. You are not being stalked around every corner by life or death threats. The kinds of threats that we face today are the threats from knowledge work. We have the anxiety of getting ready for a job interview. How do we know when we're done preparing? Or studying for the SATs. Or getting ready for the big presentation in speech class, writing the essay, asking out the cute barista, whatever the thing is. These are real stressors, but they are different stressors than the ones our minds are prepared for. And so what we are walking around with here in the 21st century is we have this kind of highly tuned freak-out-o-meter where we're expecting all of these sorts of threats all the time. Even though our hardware is designed for life or death, our knowledge work tasks are different. Every baby is born expecting the Paleolithic, but gets PowerPoint. What we can do is we can start to become aware of the tricks our minds use to keep our anxieties and our stressors, our frustrations so highly tuned. And in specific, there are 3 that I think I can share with you here today. The first of the 3 is a little trick your brain uses called cognitive ease. The way cognitive ease works in the mind, whatever we think about frequently, we think about more easily. What we think about frequently, we think about more easily. It's a bit like the way that rain can carve out little grooves in the dirt, become deeper and deeper. Every time that a raindrop passes through, it becomes easier for more rain to pass through the exact same path. It's like that, but with our thoughts. Like the writer Will Durant said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." I love this idea. We are what we repeatedly do. Because it sort of forces us to ask ourselves, what are we repeatedly doing? Well, maybe it's that we are complaining. If so, then it will become easier for more complaints to become the norm. Maybe we are gossiping quite a bit. Then our future thoughts can very easily become more gossip. Perhaps we are practicing gratitude. That makes it easier to appreciate the things around us a bit more. Maybe we're practicing good habits. Makes it easier to practice those things in the future. But we are what we repeatedly do. And the reason that this is so important to pay attention to is because your mind will be doing things all the time, whether you are aware of these habits or not. And for many of us, by default, those habits aren't really productive, not really for our benefit. There is an idea that the speaker Will Bowen has proposed called a complaint bracelet, which is designed to help track what kinds of thoughts we have all the time. The way the complaint bracelet works is you wear a bracelet or a rubber band or something on one of your wrists, and every time that you complain out loud, you take it off that wrist and you switch to the other wrist. So you become kind of aware of how frequently a complaint might drop out of your lips. Just doing that for like an afternoon, I was amazed at how many complaints I had, especially while driving. I had a lot of complaints. And just being aware of them was phenomenal, just in providing perspective and then reducing them over time. Not even having the goal of reducing them, just being aware. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this specifically for complaints, because maybe the things that you're repeatedly doing aren't complaints. Maybe there's something else. Maybe you have no idea what it is that you're repeatedly doing. If you want to find out what your mind is repeatedly doing, you can try a little bit of this solution. Weight training. A little bit of weight training is designed to give us some perspective for what our minds are doing all the time without realizing it. Weight, in this case, stands for What Am I Thinking training. Just becoming aware of the kinds of thoughts we have. Maybe it's not complaints. Maybe it's not gossip. Maybe it's planning. Maybe we're always planning ahead for the next big assignment. Maybe we're time traveling backwards. Maybe we're always reliving that last conversation where we should have said this other thing instead. Our brains like to do a lot of time traveling. Different people will be doing different things by default, and I can't pretend to know what it is that you're doing all the time. But a little bit of weight training helps us out. Here's the way weight training works. You take something that's a normal part of your life and you make it slightly different. For example, if you wear a ring, you can take it off and you put it on the wrong finger. You wore a ring on the wrong finger. Feels weird, doesn't it? Every time that you become aware of it, you think to yourself, what was I thinking? Oh, look at that. I was planning for the week ahead. Oh, look at that. I was ruminating on this conversation. Oh, look at that. I was complaining. Whatever the thing was. No judgment on whatever you were doing. Just noticing. Oh, that's what I was up to. Now, maybe you don't wear a ring. Doesn't matter. We all have something we can use. Maybe you wear a watch, normally faces outside in your wrist. You spin it around so it faces the inside for a few hours. That way, during those few hours, whenever you become aware of your watch, you go, oh, what was I thinking? Maybe you keep your keys in one pocket of your bag. Switch pockets every time you reach inside. Oh, what was I thinking right there? Maybe you are doing a lot of work and courses from home. You're not doing a lot of things outside where you're wearing jewelry and watches. Great. You can take a bunch of Post-its and you can write on them WAIT, for what am I thinking, and you can post them on your door frames at about eye level. Whenever you go from one room to the next, you notice it. Oh, look at that. What am I thinking? Oh, cool. I was appreciating the nice weather we were having. Whatever the thing is. Just so you become aware of the kinds of trends might be happening. This is one way that we can start to kind of rein in the nonstop chatter of our minds, just to get used to what it is that our brains are doing. Most of us aren't even aware, and we just sort of become the product of our thoughts. This is illusion number 1. How about illusion number 2 that our brain uses to keep us finely tuned on our freak-out-o-meter? The second big trick that our minds like to use are should statements. Now, weight training is the kind of thing that you can do several times a day. You could start doing this now. Even during this presentation, you could write down a little post-it note, WAIT. You could post it up next to your laptop. Should statements are going to happen kind of in the medium term. As you get used to practicing weight training, you get to notice what your thoughts are doing. You might notice that a disproportionate number of those thoughts are should statements. The way a should statement works is we have an idea for the way the world ought to be, and when it's not that way, we get so mad. People should be using their signal before they change lanes. That person didn't. Ooh, I'm so mad. Or my roommate should be picking up their clothes off the floor, but there's some jeans on the floor. Ooh, I'm so mad. It's a disparity between the way things ought to be and the way things are. That's if should statements are directed outwardly towards other people. We get frustrated. We could also have should statements directed towards ourselves. I see this a lot with presenters in my own classes. I should be able to pronounce this expert's name correctly, but I mispronounced the name. Ooh. When we have should statements for ourselves, that's when we get things like guilt and shame. We feel bad because we mispronounced the name in our presentation. I should remember all the points in my speech, but I had to glance back at my slides because I forgot this one point. Should statements are all about a disparity. What we think ought to happen, how they actually happen. So by definition, if we feel the frustration of a should statement, it means that our expectation was unrealistic. Because literally, what happened in reality is the most realistic thing. So if our expectations were different, our expectations were unrealistic. Should statements are kind of the way we impose our will upon the world and find reasons to get upset. It's kind of a natural byproduct of a brain looking out for us, trying to make things a certain way. Not always helpful for us in the 21st century. So what can we do? We can the shoulds. This little self-talk trick is reminding ourselves that instead of there being a way that things are supposed to be, there's actually a way that things can be. It would be certainly very helpful if every driver used their turn signal. Sure, we can definitely strive for that. It can be the case that every driver uses their turn signal. It's different than a should, than an imposition. It's instead of saying things like, something ought to be this way, it would be nice if my roommate picked up their clothes. It would be nice if I got the pronunciation correct in my presentation. It would be nice if I remembered all of the points in my presentation. Because there is a way that things can be, not necessarily the way that things ought to be. But we've got two so far. One is about the short term, right? Cognitive ease. What we think about frequently, we think about more easily. And so if those things are bad or stressful, we can become aware of them. Start to rein them in with a bit of weight training. Should statements are the kinds of thoughts we might start to notice more frequently as we practice weight training. And we can them. It's not the case that things ought to be a certain way, it's that things can be a certain way. Now, in the longest term, there is another big illusion of your mind, the one I want to spend the most time on here today, because this one takes a long time to sort of get situated in our lives. And it's probably the one that's worth spending the most time on changing our relationship with. For better or worse, in the controversial industry of elephant training. If you take a baby elephant and tie its leg with a rope to a stake in the ground so it won't run anywhere, that's how you can keep it in one place. And as it grows up, it becomes much stronger, much bigger. You might imagine it would take a stronger rope to keep that elephant in place. However, the exact same rope that kept it there as a child can keep it there as an adult. A full-grown elephant that's strong enough to snap the rope or rip the stake out of the ground stays in place with the exact same rope. It's held in place not because of the rope, but because of its idea of the rope. Now we might think to ourselves, oh, poor elephant, if only the elephant were more intelligent, if it knew better, then it could snap the rope and go and be free wherever it wanted to go. But strangely, it's actually the elephant's intelligence that keeps it there. It's the pattern recognition. Tugging on the rope doesn't do anything. Tugging on the rope doesn't do anything. Could you think of other mammals with intelligence that can be held in place not because of actual barriers, but because of their ideas? You got it. Us too. This is a phenomenon that is now known as learned helplessness. This is such a powerful self-talk phenomenon that I think it's worth spending the most time on here today because it's so pernicious and it weaves into our lives in all sorts of invisible ways. I can't pretend to know what this might look like in your own life, but I can tell you about some examples that I've seen or experienced for myself. Perhaps a student has a math class with a teacher that's maybe not totally there to teach, right? Not so great as a teacher. And at the end of the year, they go, all right, well, you know what? I'm just bad at math because the one data point. But math, strangely, isn't like singing or painting or dancing, like the kinds of skills we cultivate. Math just exists outside of us. Math doesn't care if you are good at it or bad at it. If you follow the order of operations, you're going to end up with the right answer. Learned helplessness can train us to believe that we are bad at math. I see this with speakers coming into my communication classes. Maybe they've had one presentation in the past where they got really nervous and they blanked out. It was just a busy, stressful week for them. And so they didn't perform as well as they liked in that one presentation, so they enter my class now going, I'm a nervous speaker. I'm just a bad speaker. That's how it is. Other people are good at this. I'm bad at this. However, we all talk all the time. If you can have a conversation with your friends where you are charismatic, making eye contact, confident in what you're saying, you can do the exact same thing just with different people in front of you, or with more people in front of you. The vocal cords, the eyes, all function the exact same ways. But it's our learned helplessness, our invisible ropes that we create in our minds, not the literal ones that exist in nature, that hold us back. Oh, I wish I could give you a nice, tidy trick that you could use, like Post-its for weight training, or canning the shoulds. This is probably going to take a deeper dive. Kind of a longer-term solution to retrain our self-talk. So what could we do? Thankfully, there is something in the literature, in the world of psychology, that could be helpful for us. It's a technique called mental simulation. If our ideas of things can keep us stuck in place, like not succeeding at math, or not approaching someone that we think is out of our league, or not giving a presentation when we know a lot about the subject, we are mentally simulating our own invisible ropes. We are simulating our own being stuck in place. So we can simulate the opposite. There's a very famous meta-analysis from the Journal of Applied Psychology that was taking a look at the effects of mental simulation on people's performance. What if they mentally practiced something different? For example, you get two people that know how to play the saxophone. One of them is learning to play a new song by looking at sheet music and physically playing the saxophone. The other one learns the song, but closes their eyes, never touches the saxophone. They just think in their heads of what buttons they would have to press, how hard they would have to compress the air through their lungs. They imagined it mentally. Both saxophone players would perform about the same. In fact, this meta-analysis here, this study of studies, examined thousands of people, over 3,000 participants, and found that mental simulation gives you 2/3 the benefit of physical practice. That's amazing. I kind of wonder how much progress for all kinds of things I've left on the table because I've chosen not to mentally rehearse, to practice a different version of what I see in my mind. Instead of seeing the version of myself that's freaked out and scared in front of an audience, or is anxious before a workshop, what about rehearsing the version of myself that's excited, or can't wait for this? May as well practice it. Now, there is a caveat. Turns out that these are really effective for cognitive tasks. The more physical the task is, the more you have to physically do the practice. If you want to be an Olympic acrobat, you can't just sit around with your eyes closed all day. You got to go hit the mat and do your backflips. But cognitive tasks, like bringing up the courage to present in front of a class, or having the focus to concentrate on the math assignment for a while, this sounds a lot like knowledge work. The kinds of stuff that you and I are beleaguered with every day. So this then could be really helpful for us. Now, you can tell I kind of like having these little quirky solutions for things, right? Weight training, can the shoulds. Mental simulation is a little bit academic, isn't it? I mean, I throw a little screenshot of a meta-analysis at you. It's a little academic. I kind of like my little bite-sized things. There's nothing like that for us for mental simulation in the academic literature. However, there actually is a nickname for this exact same technique in the world of pop culture, in movies, in books, and TV shows that you probably have already heard of, whether you realize it or not. Mental simulation is closing our eyes, running a mental rehearsal of circumstances that we prefer, is also self-hypnosis. Now, when I drop the H word there, hypnosis, we often conjure up images in our minds of swinging pocket watches and swirly eyeballs and mind control and things like that. But it's not at all like we see in movies and TV shows. Hypnosis is essentially when our mental experience drives our real experience. If you're watching, I don't know, fail videos online and you see somebody like a skateboarder like do the splits over a railing and you go, ooh, and you feel pain yourself. What caused the pain? Nothing hit you, but the mental experience created like a near physical reaction for you. Now, by default, we all have different capabilities for turning our mental experience into a real experience. There's kind of a bell curve for how practiced we are at this. All of us can do this. All of us can turn a mental experience into a real experience. A bulk of us, around 70% of us, are pretty average self-hypnotizers. But around 10 to 15% of us out there on the tails are really, really good self-hypnotizers. We can take a mental image, experience, and translate it into real physical byproducts for ourselves. I'll give you an example of this. I can give you a few different little hands-on exercises in the world of self-hypnosis, so you get a chance to experience what this feels like for yourself. A little mental simulation all together, so that you can go out and you can practice this on your own for whatever it is that you want. So let's start out with something kind of in the middle of the bell curve there. That'll work for just about all of us. If you want to try out this experience for yourself, oh, by the way, I should give you a few promises before we try out these little exercises in self-hypnosis. Promise number one is we're not going to embarrass or humiliate anybody. I know I just made a call for cameras on and I'm dropping the word hypnosis around, but this is not a Vegas show. No one's going to be running around clucking like a duck, right? No one's going to be running around like with their shirt off. There's nothing like that. In fact, it's not in my best interest to do that, because at the end, there's going to be an evaluation. And if I'm going around embarrassing everybody, you're going to say bad things about me, rightly so. I want you to say good things about me and encourage your friends to attend this future workshop. So it's in my best interest not to embarrass or humiliate anybody. That's promise number one. Promise number two, all of this is completely voluntary. If I ask you to run through a little suggestion in your mind and you just don't want to do it, great, you just don't have to. So we can try this one out. If you want to try this out at home, it's kind of just a cognitive experience, a little proof of concept. It should have worked for lots of us here. I'm going to have you go ahead and you can kind of sit comfortably there against the back of your chairs. You can uncross your legs. You can unclasp your hands. You can rest them there comfortably in your lap. Wonderfully done. Thank you much. I'm going to ask you to indulge me here for a moment. Just imagine, go ahead and look somewhere out in space about a foot away from you, hovering in the air. Imagine hovering in front of you a lemon, a bright yellow juicy lemon. Imagine it being sliced in half. You can see some of the juice dripping down. Very juicy lemon. Imagine what it would feel like if one half of the lemon were floating towards your face, and what it would feel like to take a giant bite into that raw lemon. And ooh, it is sour. Imagine feeling all the juice flowing around your gums, across your teeth. You can feel the pulp, and it is really sour and gross. Ugh. Imagine taking another bigger bite into that lemon. More juice, more sourness, more pulp flowing around in the mouth. That is one sour, raw lemon. And you can imagine it gone. No lemon, no juices. You can look back here at the screen with me. Ugh. By show of hands, how many of you here feel more saliva in your mouth now? Right? Yeah, Alexa, you do. Alexis does. Laura, you do. Yeah. Cameron does. Yeah, Shelly, you do. How many of you noticed your facial expression changing as you were imagining this? Kind of like, kind of gross out, kind of contorting, things like that. Any of us there? Yeah. Grace, Emmanuel there. Yeah. Laura, you did. Alexa did. Now, the thing that you were doing there, you weren't like playing along, right? It wasn't like you were acting, going, ooh, this lemon's gross. Ugh, right? It was like involuntary. The facial expressions changed on their own. You were reacting to something. Heck, the salivating thing, that's involuntary. You couldn't do that if you tried. If you sat there right now and you're like, salivate now, like nothing happens. Our bodies will produce these effects to what? To nothing. We're producing more saliva to combat the acidity of an idea. It's our own suggestion. Our own mental simulation. You can simulate things like sour lemons. You can simulate things like confidence, like preparedness, like being addicted to a good habit, like journaling or staying hydrated. So that's pretty good. That worked actually with quite a bit of us. So I'll tell you what, let's swing for the fences here. We can try a few exercises where I'll be looking for those of us out here on the bell curve. I mentioned there's kind of a bell curve here. We got a pretty good turnout here today. So we got about 20 people in the room, which suggests that statistically, 1, 2, 3 of us are going to be really practiced mental simulators. People that are good at self-hypnosis probably haven't been calling it hypnosis in their own lives. They call it something else. Maybe they're runners and they get into like this focus zone of a runner's high. Or maybe they're musicians and they just get into a flow state as they're jamming on their instrument. Maybe they're a meditator and they learn to focus in meditation and set aside all distractions. Or maybe they get really into prayers all the time because with their church they do prayer practice. Whatever the thing is, if you practice focusing and setting aside other distractions, you're probably a really good self-hypnotizer. You can take a mental experience and make it your real experience. The idea of lemons could translate to actual salivation. The image of yourself on a roll could lead to genuine confidence before a presentation. Pretty cool stuff. So I'll tell you what, we got a room full of people here. Let's try a few exercises. You want to try these out? You want to try these? That was like a quick and dirty one. You don't have to move around. Some of these you might move around a little bit, yeah? This is going to be especially helpful if you haven't already to have cameras on. Thank you there for those of you that have. I see Alexa there. I see Alexis there. All right. If you want to try this one out, you can sit comfortably there in the backs of your chairs. You can uncross your legs. You can unclasp your hands. Nicely done. Perfect. Thank you there, Stephanie. I see you there. And if you want to try this out, I'm going to have you extend your right hand face up just like this. Perfect. Nicely done. And just imagine what it might feel like if I took a clear capsule filled with super glue and I reached through the screen and I dropped it right there onto your right hand. Imagine you could feel the weight of that capsule there. Now you can take your left hand and you can just close it around, wrapping the fingers around those hands, and you can start to just squeeze. Tight, 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 tighter and tighter. That's it. As you continue to squeeze and to listen to my voice, just imagine those hands locking, fusing, sticking together. In fact, for a moment, go ahead and look at one spot on your hands. Don't look at me. Look at one spot on your hands that you can focus on. That's right. As you continue to listen to my voice and look at that spot, you can feel those hands squeezing, fusing, locking down tight. In fact, I'm going to count backwards from 3 down to 1. By the time we hit 1, I want you to imagine that that capsule is burst and has glued those hands together so that they couldn't pull apart, even if you tried, until I released them. That's right. Stuck, fused, locked together. Starting off with 3, squeezing, locking, fusing down. You can feel the rigidity around the wrists going down to the elbows. You can feel some of the warmth there in the center of your hand as the chemical reactions in the glue tries to start to take form. Squeezing, locking, fusing down to 2, tighter and tighter. That's right. Locked, fused, sticking like glue to each other. If you haven't felt it already, I want you to imagine what it might feel like if that capsule burst and you could feel all the glue oozing, seeping around through your hands, filling all the little nooks and crannies. What might it feel like as it filled every microscopic little hole, locking, fusing those fingers down tight? I'm not sure if you feel the fingertips or the palms sticking more tightly to each other, but as you become aware of that, notice how everything locks and fuses, almost as if those hands were carved from a single block of wood, just one solid chunk there that couldn't pull apart, all the way down to 1. Feel that glue cure, freeze, lock, stick in place. Every little twitch, every little nudge, that's right, starts to lock and fuse those fingers even more tightly to each other. In fact, you could prove this sensation to yourself, so that these hands will not pull apart until I release them. If you give your hands a little wiggle, notice how they stick down even further. Give them a little wiggle, see how they stick even further. In fact, if you try to pull them apart, see how they stick. Try to pull them apart, see how they stick. Try to pull them apart and they stick even more. You are not trying hard enough. Genuinely try to pull your hands apart right now. If your hands are genuinely stuck together, like you really can't pull them apart, could you wave them around on camera right now? I want to make sure that we're not leaving you behind. If they are honestly stuck, for real, you're not like playing along, I didn't send you an email ahead of time. Who was that there? Rose over there? Were you waving your hands around? Yeah. Are they genuinely stuck there? If your hands are genuinely stuck there, could you wave them around so that we know? I want to make sure that we're not leaving you behind. My goodness. Yeah, for real? You're trying to unstick these hands? That is crazy there. For everybody there at home, Candace, you having a hard time over there? Are they genuinely stuck over there, Candace? Yeah, for real. You can kind of wave them around over there. For real, you're trying. I didn't like send you an email ahead of time and be like, hey, play along. You're trying to unstick those hands. That's crazy. All right, for everybody that might have their hands stuck right now, sorry about that. That might be like 10 to 15% of you out there. We can start to unfuse that glue. I'll count backwards from 3 down to 1. You can feel that glue melt away. 3, melting away, getting the fingertips moving back again. 2, starting to get the movement back in the palms. And 1, melting away, completely gone, getting that movement back there in the fingertips. That is super strange. Everybody now at home, you can kind of shake out those hands, get the circulation back, feeling nice and comfortable there for us. Okay, some of us, we had kind of like cameras and we're like off camera, stuff like that. Could you wave on camera if you felt your hands genuinely stuck to each other there? Yeah? For real? That's right, we had Candace there. Yeah, Alexa, you did. Stephanie, you did. That is so nuts. I don't think I see. Stephanie's camera is kind of mostly up there at the head and the ceiling, so I couldn't quite see there. Stephanie, could you jump on microphone? Could you tell us, what did that feel like?
It just felt like I couldn't really take it apart.
You couldn't take your hands apart. Okay, now people watching this at home, they're going to be like, oh, okay, no, Stephanie's in on it. She's just playing along. Chris sent her an email. Did anybody tell you to like, oh, just pretend, just play along? Nobody? So this wasn't like a trick that you're in on. Have you ever had your hands literally stuck like that before in your life? You haven't? That's so strange. And I guess to be fair, there's not like actual glue or anything on your hands, right? You weren't like doing arts and crafts before this. Okay, that is so nuts. Thank you there, Stephanie. Alexa, you can jump on microphone there with us. Thanks for waving me down there. Alexa, what was that like? What did that feel like on your end?
I really did. It was hard to pull apart after. Yeah.
It was. Could you describe what that hard is like? Because other people here at home, they just pull their hands apart like this. They're like, what? I don't get it. So what do you mean, hard to pull apart? What does that feel like?
I think once you believe it, then your body just goes along with what you're telling yourself. So that's why. Mm-hmm.
Trippy, isn't it? Absolutely trippy. Thanks so much for... Yeah, super trippy. Thanks for jumping on and sharing that with us. This is a mental experience becoming a real experience. There are actually a few more hands. I'll tell you what, just for time's sake, I don't think we can interview everybody that this was happening to, but... Any of you here, if this didn't happen with you, because again, I was swinging for the fences. I expected maybe 1 or 2 people. Looks like we got 3 or 4 people that I saw over here on camera that had their hands stuck. But you've had this experience. You ever woke up in the morning and you just couldn't get out of bed? Like you just felt like you physically couldn't get out of bed? Yeah? Bunch of us have. I don't mean like because you had like a back injury or something. I mean like this sensation where like the more you try to get out of bed, the more stuck you get to the mattress. It's so weird, isn't it? Nothing's like wrong with your spine or whatever. And if there was like, I don't know, if your house was on fire, of course you could leap out of bed and get out. But somehow, physically, you can't. And if you think you can't, you may as well not be able to. Now, we get stuck like this. This is a metaphor, essentially, that I can show you here on camera, a little exercise that we can have. But we get stuck in other ways, too. Maybe we get stuck where we just can't get started on our presentation. Or we can't get started writing our essay. We can't get started, I don't know, asking out the cutie from work. Whatever, right? We feel like we just can't. Now, of course, we literally can. But if we feel like we can't, we may as well be literally stuck. How many people do we know around us that are stuck to good things? They're stuck to a great habit. This person seems stuck to a journaling habit. How do you keep that up all the time? That's amazing. You could do that. I can't do that. Or one of our friends is stuck to like carrying around a water bottle. They're so healthy. How do you do that? It feels wrong for them to not journal or to not have the water bottle. What if we could do that? What if we could get ourselves stuck to our good habits? We could. It's the exact same experience. Want to try some more? This is kind of cool. We got more people respond to that than I kind of expect. I expected one or two, and there are a bunch of hands over here. What the heck? We can try this out. Okay, if you like. We got some time over here. We got some time. Okay, if you want to try this one out, as you know, you can sit comfortably there against the backs of your chairs. You can uncross your legs. You can unclasp your hands. Nicely done. Let's start off with our right hands. You can take your right hands, and you can bring them up, and you can pop it right on top of your head, just like that. Remember that feeling of that glue, that stuckness, that stickiness before? Let's bring that back up here from the top of our heads underneath our hands. And you can take that hand, you can start to push down and to squeeze, locking tighter and tighter, sticking, stuck like glue. Bring that sensation back. You can magnify it 10 times as strong as it was before. I'll count backwards from 3 down to 1. By the time we hit 1, it's going to feel like that hand is stuck, fused to the top of the head, as if they were from the same bone, one solid block of wood, so that nothing could lift that hand until I release it. That's right, starting off with 3, locking, fusing, squeezing, fusing down tighter and tighter. The fingertips there, the palm locking. You can feel the rigidity running all the way down the wrist, down the elbow, into the shoulder. Down to 2, feeling the fingertips or the palm squeezing tighter. I'm not sure which one is locked more tightly, but notice how everything locks and fuses, as if there is no difference between the hand and the skull. It's all one solid piece, like one solid bone, one solid piece of concrete, all the way down to 1, locking, fusing, squeezing tighter. That's right. And every little wiggle, you can prove the sensation to yourself. Once you know that this is stuck, give a little wiggle and you can notice how it locks even more. That's right. Every little wiggle locks it, fuses even more. In fact, if you were to try to lift that hand, notice how it sticks even more tightly. Try to lift it and notice how it sticks. Try to lift it and it sticks. You are not trying hard enough. Genuinely try to lift that hand, notice how it sticks. If you are genuinely noticing your hand is stuck right now, could you wave your free hand? You're not playing along. If your hand is genuinely stuck right now, could you wave your free hand? For real? We got some... Okay, we have some predicaments over here. Laura there, with your free hand. Could you unmute there? That is so strange. Let's see, Candace there, could you unmute? I want to get a few of us here. Jahia, with your free hand, could you unmute there? There's a few of us there. I want to get a chance to chat with a few of us. With your free hand there, Jahia. Do you have... What's going on? What's that like?
It kind of feels like my arm is like really like tight and it's spreading all the way to my hands up here, and it's kind of hard to pull. Like if I pull, I feel like I'm like pulling something that's stuck.
Yeah.
Almost like
you're not just playing along. It's like your hand has a mind of its own.
Yeah.
That is so trippy. Thank you there, Jahia. Sorry about that predicament. We'll get you unstuck there in a second. Candace was another person I think I went through. Could you jump? Yeah, what is that like? What does that feel like?
It feels weird. It's like my hand is just like stuck. Every time I try to move it, it gets even harder to move. It's heavy.
Has that ever happened to you before?
No.
Hasn't happened? That's real strange.
No.
Sorry about that. There's a few of us over there that are still stuck. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Oh, better watch out on time there. Tell you what, for everybody at home who might have their hands stuck on their head, sorry about that. I'll count backwards from 3 down to 1, and we can unfuse those hands for you. 3, melting away that glue, that stuck sensation, getting the motion back in the fingertips, sensations in the palms, all the way down to 2, getting some of the movement back in the wrist, and 1, releasing, lifting, gliding lightly at your own rate and speed. That is so strange. Sorry about that. Okay, we can all shake out our hands there. Anybody here, raise of hand, your hand was stuck and you were able to get it off, but you had to really fight it? Was anybody like that? You had to like really try and fight it?
It was just like it was just attached. It was really, really difficult to move it.
But it was genuinely difficult there for you. And of course,
yes,
just
it was.
Just to make sure you're okay there, Laura, you can just go like this freely right now, can't you? Up and down with no issue. Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing there with us, Laura. These are mental experiences that drive our real experiences. I'm using these fun little experiments here right now because they're quick to do in just a couple of minutes. We can salivate at the idea of the lemon. We can have our hand stuck to our other hand or to our head with the idea of it sticking. But these are all metaphors for real things. We experience other mental things that drive our real experience. Maybe we are sort of have a bitter experience about our relationships with others, and we can experience the bitterness like we might experience the sourness of a lemon. We might be stuck to certain bad or unproductive habits, like we always have that extra piece of cake after dinner, or we always just play one more round of Overwatch before starting our homework, whatever the thing is. We could just as easily be stuck to our good habits too. What if we were stuck to one more paragraph on this essay before we went for dinner? Or one more thank you text to a friend a week? You know, one more good habit that could build our relationships, give us some peace of mind, make us more productive. The self-talk tools that we already have, things like cognitive ease, things like should statements, things like learned helplessness, these mental simulations, these aren't bugs. These are features. They're just features that have been put to use for different circumstances. You and I in the 21st century, we can retrain these pathways in our mind to be more helpful for us here, in our own lives, with our knowledge work, without discrete edges. Just in case you feel like this is something that you're interested in a bit more, you want to explore this, maybe 3 tricks of the mind isn't enough for you, you want to learn about way more of them, well, no problem. I have a resource for you that you can have today before you leave this session. So one of the big projects that I had, I'm going to kind of share with you personally a big obstacle that I had. Talk about self-talk for success is all about getting more done and feeling better doing it. There was a pet project of mine that was a big lofty goal. I was stuck in place, not getting started on it. I had to retrain myself, and that was to write a book. But once the pandemic hit, we were all stuck at home. I kind of ran out of excuses. I was at home. So you know what? Finally, trying to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. I finally went ahead and I did it. I completed my book over the pandemic. It's all about communication skills, a book that I can give away for free to my students, things like that, all about, building presentations. But there's also a chapter in there all about self-talk. It's a much deeper dive into everything we're talking about here. Now, I'll admit it is through the lens of communication, so it's all about like building confidence in a presentation, but still the principles there you could apply for all kinds of things. If that's something that you think you'd be interested in, I would love to just give it to you here right now. If I could, I'd love to offer you a little trade, a couple of minutes of your time, and I'll give you the chapter that's all about self-talk. If you got your phones, you can scan this QR code here, or you can go to this little URL, and you can leave a few comments, a bit of feedback about this session here today. So I would love to find out what you think was effective in today's session so I can do more of it. I'd love to find out what didn't work so well in today's session. That way I can do less of it, but I can only make this better with your feedback. This survey takes just a couple of minutes. Heck, some of you could probably do it in the amount of time it takes you to hold your breath. And then the moment you're done with it, you're going to automatically start a download of this chapter of the book. It's the chapter all about self-talk. It's about building our confidence in presentations. And it walks you through not 3, but actually 11 different mini mental scripts that we have. So if you like the stuff that we're talking about today, you're going to get plenty more of it there. If, of course, later on after this chapter, you find out that you're interested in the entire book, then I will just give it to you. I actually used to just give away the entire copy after sessions like this, but what I realized was it was a little too intense. People were getting hit with 300 pages. It felt like homework, and so they weren't reading it. I don't blame them. And so to try to be as helpful as I can, I'm just giving this one section that's the most relevant to what you might be interested in. But if you like what you see and you want more, then just shoot me an email. My email is actually in the download there, and I'll just give you the entire book for free. I'll give you the ebook, I'll give you the audiobook, whatever you like, as a thank you for showing up here today, for sharing this interest with me, and for thank you so much. You can probably tell that this is a subject that I care very passionately about. I've certainly struggled with my own self-talk and my own nervousness. It's why I'm so interested in this topic, because I really believe in my heart of hearts that you have skills, knowledge, expertise, you have things to share with this world, and the more that I can make it easy for you to share your skills, your expertise, your talents with the world, the better the world is for all of us. So maybe it's about self-talk, maybe it's about nervousness, maybe it's about giving confident presentations. I can help you with that too. I'm going to show you my email here. It's in the download there. If I could just be helpful at all in the future. If you got a presentation coming up and you want to talk shop with somebody that can help you out, great. Let me know. Or maybe you're at a different campus and maybe you have presentations for another audience and you feel like this message could be great for your audience. Great. Shoot me an email. Let me know. I'd love to deliver this presentation at your campus or for your organization, or maybe for your workplace, whatever it is. You can tell I care about this stuff and I want to help as many people as possible with this information. So please definitely reach out, and I'm happy to talk shop with you more. I've been throwing a lot at you. It might feel like you had a little bit of a fire hose, and I wouldn't blame you. We've been talking a lot today. So just a kind of recap to make things bite-sized and helpful for you. Ultimately, our minds are looking out for us, but they're looking out for us in a different time. They're keeping us kind of freaked out, a little bit more than might be necessary. There are a few different tricks that our minds use to do this. One might be cognitive ease. The things that we think frequently, we think easily. So what can we do? We can use some weight training to notice what we're thinking frequently. It might be complaints, it might be gripes, might be gossip, it might be planning ahead, it might be reminiscing, whatever the thing is, just to become aware. Secondly, as we practice weight training, you might start noticing the should statements. These are the source of our frustrations for others and for ourselves, a disparity between the way things are and the way we want them to be. But we can can them. By canning the shoulds, we remind ourselves that there's not a way that things ought to be, but there's a way that things can be. It would be nice if, rather than it should be this way. And finally, over the long term, as you get used to capturing those should statements, you might start to notice some learned helplessness. It's going to be different for everybody. Maybe it's about giving presentations. Maybe it's about applying for ambitious jobs. But we keep ourselves stuck in place, not with physical barriers like ropes or skills and abilities, but with invisible ropes, mental constructs that we have for ourselves. Not because we're dumb, because we're intelligent. We recognize patterns, even if those patterns don't reflect the truth. Pattern isn't always what's true. So how do we retrain this learned helplessness? We can use a little mental simulation. If we're keeping ourselves stuck in place because we already mentally rehearse the image of ourselves cowering before a presentation, shaking hands, getting jittery hands, or blanking out in a presentation, what if we rehearse the opposite? What if we rehearsed a nice, cool, composed posture, ease of voice, steady hands, solid eye contact? You think we might experience something different? We absolutely would. You experience physical changes here today just by imagining a lemon or imagining some invisible made-up glue between your hands. Mental rehearsal is a powerful force for our own benefit. Left to its own devices, it could work against us. But after today, you don't have to leave those rehearsals to chance. You can direct them by choice.